The Christian Girl and Her Muslim Apostate Lover, a novel by Dr. A. Ahmed. This story is narrated in 3 books. Book 3. Copyrights. All rights are reserved. No part of this book may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means without the prior written permission of the author, except by a reviewer who may quote brief passages in a review to be printed in a newspaper, magazine, school journal, or university article. This novel is a work of fiction, but the entire story is based on the actual life of a Muslim apostate girl in Sudan. Therefore, all names, characters, places, and incidents are either the product of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, events, or locales is entirely coincidental. Chapter 48. The Dangerous Offender and Founder of a Terrorist Religious Cult. The outcome of the trial was again a great disappointment to the CEO and other directors of the Muslims' Liberation Movement. Dr. Ibtihal expected that she would be able through the lawsuit to convince the criminal court to place a ban on the Quran and the hadiths of the Prophet Muhammad because they included anti-Semitism against the Jews, produced dangerous terrorist teachings against non-Muslims, and misogyny against women. Although the court did not reject her lawsuit, still, she felt the decision of the judge and his jury is unfair. In the previous trial, the same criminal court placed a ban on her book because it included one phrase that was considered anti-Islamic, while the so-called inspired Quran of Allah and the hadiths of the alleged prophet of God included many verses and sentences full of instigation to kill innocent people because they rejected the claim of Muhammad as the messenger of God. The court should have applied the same rule to place those Islamic texts on ban in Canada as it did to the book. Imagine a world without Islam and Muslims, and imagine a world in which all countries have become Muslims. However, the court made an exemption and gave reasons that did not make sense to the controversial author Dr. Ibtihal. On ban in Canada because their author was dead and gone centuries ago. The Muslim apostate girl Ibtihal tried to convince the Canadian court by saying that, if a book had been written 1400 years ago and has in it anti-Semitic and terrorist teachings, that book should be placed under ban to protect society from its teachings. Still, the Court of Toronto rejected her request to issue an order to stop Muslims from possessing and teaching their religious texts in Canada. Notwithstanding, the genius girl Dr. Ibtihal refused to give up and decided to lodge a second complaint against Islam. This time, she decided to direct her attack on the founder of the religion of Islam himself. She is basing her complaint on her own bitter experience of being a Muslim apostate girl. She was tortured and abused in Sudan during her marriage and apostasy from Islam. Therefore, she decided to lodge a complaint against the Prophet Muhammad and accuse him as a dangerous offender and founder of a terrorist religious cult which produces every year thousands of Muslim terrorists all over the world. In Canada, England, and Wales, certain convicted persons might be designated as dangerous offenders and subject to a longer, or indefinite, term of imprisonment in order to protect the public. The purpose of the legislation is to detain offenders who are deemed too dangerous to be released into society because of their violent tendencies. The author of the third controversial book knew and understood that the Prophet Muhammad fits to a T the definition of the dangerous offender. Therefore, he should be subjected to indefinite imprisonment to protect society from his terrorist and abusive teachings. It is a fact that Muhammad died 14 centuries ago. Still, the smart girl Ibtihal believes that his teachings in the Quran and the hadiths produce dangerous offenders who are called by various names such as Islamic terrorists, militants, radical Muslims, woman abusers, or religious leaders who teach their followers to carry out terrorist attacks against non-Muslims in the name of jihad. According to her, every Muslim who becomes a true follower and sincerely practices the teachings of the Quran and hadiths of Muhammad becomes a terrorist and poses an imminent threat to society. Therefore, he must be designated as a dangerous offender and detained indefinitely. entices the teachings of the Quran and hadiths of Muhammad, becomes a terrorist and poses an imminent threat to society. Therefore, he must be designated as a dangerous offender and detained indefinitely. Dr. Ibtihal supported her lawsuit with her personal bitter experience of being a Muslim apostate in Sudan, the many attempted assassinations she faced in Athens, London, Ankara, Copenhagen, and Toronto. She also supplied the verses of the Quran and hadiths of the founder of Islam that teach jihad and violence against the so-called unclean infidels and enemies of Allah and His Prophet Muhammad, such as the Jews, Christians, Hindus, Buddhists, atheists, feminists, communists, and followers of other religions and ideologies. Once again, the criminal court in Toronto refused to accept her complaint on the grounds that she had already submitted a similar lawsuit, and the court decided upon it. Moreover, the Prophet Muhammad had passed away on June 8, 632 AD, and therefore he could not be tried in absentia. Dr. Ibtihal appealed the former decision of the court against her and against her so-called controversial book, but her appeal was turned down too. Even so, following the advice of Dr. Kamal, the bold Sudanese girl Ibtihal decided to submit a lawsuit against the Prophet of Islam to the International Criminal Court in Hague, the Netherlands. Chapter 49. War Crimes and Crimes Against Humanity in Islam. The International Criminal Court in the Netherlands accepts complaints against individuals if they committed genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and the crime of aggression. The Sudanese apostate girl Dr. Ibtihal believed that Muhammad was guilty of all those crimes. However, in her lawsuit, she decided to concentrate on war crimes and crimes against humanity. To make her lawsuit impressive, appealing, and convincing, Dr. Ibtihal employed a team of legal experts to formulate her case. It took the team 6 months to produce a 225 pages report about the crimes against humanity that the alleged prophet of God Muhammad and his immediate caliphs, Abu Bakr, Omar, Osman, and Ali committed against innocent people and neighboring countries. It took the team 6 months to produce a 225 pages report about the crimes against humanity that the alleged prophet of God Muhammad and his immediate caliphs, Abu Bakr, Omar, Osman, and Ali committed against innocent people and neighboring countries. The legal team prepared a second report of 500 pages summarizing the crimes against humanity committed by the other Islamic caliphates of the Umayyad, Abbasid, Fatimid, and Ottoman empires. The caliphate is the only form of governance that has full approval in the Sharia. Although the last Islamic caliphate was officially abolished in Turkey in 1924 by Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, the Islamic leaders in Muslim countries continue to commit crimes against humanity until today. The main objective of Al-Qaeda is to restore the Islamic Caliphate through jihad against the influences of the Western countries in Muslim countries and get rid of the hypocritical Muslim leaders and reunite Muslims all over the world under one caliph. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi claimed to be that caliph and established in Syria and Iraq the evilest caliphate ever produced by the religion of peace, which is universally known as Islam. The legal team prepared a third report of 1,000 pages briefly describing the modern Islamic terrorist groups and the crimes that they committed and continue to commit against innocent people. The legal team supplied enough evidence to prove that the current Islamic terrorist groups base and justify their crimes against humanity on the teachings of the Quran and hadiths of the Prophet Muhammad. The lawsuit also accused the founder of Islam of other aggressive crimes he committed against individuals. First, he is accused as a child abuser, and for that, the lawsuit referred to the case of his child bride Aisha bint Abu Bakr, whom he married at the age of 6 and began to rape when she was still a child of 9. Secondly, the Prophet of Islam is accused of being a sex offender who murdered a Jewish leader, kidnapped his wife, and raped her on the same day he killed her husband. People who wrote verses of poetry criticizing his cruelty towards his enemies. The most notable 2 examples were 1, the case of the old woman Gurfa, whom he tied to 2 camels and split her body into 2 halves, and 2, the case of Asma bint Marwan, who was killed during her sleep on her bed and while she was feeding her infant baby. Her murderer thrust his sword into her bare chest until it came out of her back. Fourth, the Prophet of Islam is accused of torturing people to death. The lawsuit quoted the example of the people whom the Prophet Muhammad had their hands and feet cut off. Then he ordered nails, which were heated and passed over their eyes, and they were left in the Hara, which was an extremely hot rocky land in Medina city. They asked for water, and nobody provided them with water till they died of thirst and torture. Once again, the International Criminal Court rejected the lawsuit of the Muslims' liberation movement against the Prophet of Islam on the grounds that the court would not accept complaints against people who died centuries ago. If the complainer wants the International Criminal Court to accept her lawsuit, some legal representatives in Europe have wisely advised the Sudanese Muslim apostate girl Ibtihal Taha Al-Amin to redirect the complaint against the main Islamic texts, the Quran and Hadiths of Muhammad, which teach and justify terrorist activities. Dr. Ibtihal followed the advice of those legal representatives of the International Criminal Court and requested her legal team to redraft the 3 reports to meet the conditions of the International Court. The legal team faced serious difficulties while it was redrafting the 3 reports. They found out that the Islamic texts, the Quran and Hadiths, are inseparable from the character of the Prophet Muhammad. Aisha, the beloved wife of the alleged Prophet of Allah, when she was asked about her husband's manners, said, "The Quran is his manners." Aisha, whom Muhammad began to rape her from the age of a 9-year-old child, knew the Quran reflects the cruelty and brutality of her abuser and rapist. The Copt Maria, and he said Allah revealed a verse justifying his adultery. Aisha said to him angrily, "Why do I see your Lord hastens to satisfy your whims?" That means Aisha understood that whenever Muhammad did something evil, he would claim his Allah gave him license to justify his evil act. For that reason, she said to his companions, "The Quran is his manners." Muhammad said to his followers, "You must all imitate me." Therefore, it is imperative in Islam for each and every Muslim man and Muslima woman to imitate the Messenger of Allah. On the contrary, the Prophet Muhammad forbade his followers from imitating the Jews and Christians. He said, "You will surely follow the ways of those who preceded you. You will follow them span after span and cubit by cubit. Even if they enter the lizard's hole, you will follow them." They, the companions, asked, "O Messenger of Allah, are they the Jews and Christians?" He replied, "Then whom?" Meaning, yes, they are. Sahih al-Bukhari, Hadith number 7320. However, to go around those difficulties, the genius girl Ibtihal suggested a brilliant idea to her legal team. She proposed that the lawsuit should mention that every Muslim in the world is a replica of the character of Muhammad. Therefore, the goal of every Muslim in the world is to become another Muhammad. The closer to the character of Muhammad the Muslim reaches, the more dangerous he becomes to society and non-Muslim people. If we have to mention a few modern examples of those who imitated Muhammad 100% are Khomeini, Osama bin Laden, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, Hassan Nasrallah, and Idi Amin Dada, among other terrorist leaders. Therefore, sincerely following the sacred texts of Islam, the verses of the Quran and the Hadiths of the Prophet Muhammad produces every now and then thousands of terrorists and dangerous offenders under the model of the Prophet of Islam. Keeping them in Guantanamo Bay detention camp or fighting them in Syria, Afghanistan, and Iraq would not solve the problem. The Quran and Hadiths clone every now and then thousands upon thousands of demon-possessed Muslim terrorists after the example of the Prophet Muhammad. In fact, every Muslim in the world wants to be another duplicate of Muhammad. Demon-possessed Muslim terrorists after the example of the Prophet Muhammad. In fact, every Muslim in the world wants to be another duplicate of Muhammad. The Muslim who succeeds in imitating everything Muhammad said and did would become a new incarnation of him, as Osama bin Laden and Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi and their followers did in our time. The lawsuit also included a sub-complaint about Muslim women's abuse and oppression in Islam. The Quran allows the husband to cheat on his wife by bringing a second wife beside her. Surah Al-Nisa 4, verse 3. The wife could not stop him from cheating on her because she would be considered going against the word of God and becomes an infidel Muslim apostate. It permits a husband to beat his wife if she disobeys him, and the father to chastise his rebellious daughter. Surah Al-Nisa 4, verse 34. The Islamic texts prohibit the woman from being a president, caliph, religious leader, imama, or malana. Also, she cannot become a boss, judge, or lawyer. There are reports of Muslim wives in Western countries being beaten by their husbands by the copies of the Quran on their heads. There are also reports of Muslim men having married secretly more than 2 wives in Europe and America. The International Criminal Court accepted the lawsuit of the Muslims' liberation movement and appointed a date for the hearing. Then the court invited any Islamic group that is interested to present the counter-defense to the serious charges that the Muslims' liberation movement has brought against the sacred Islamic texts, the Quran and Hadiths. The Mufti of Egypt, who is also the rector of the Al-Azhar Al-Sharif University, is the first religious head to respond to the invitation of the International Criminal Court. Although many other religious countries and groups responded to the invitation, the International Criminal Court rejected all of them and became satisfied with the first response that was submitted by Al-Azhar Al-Sharif University, which is the greatest Islamic center of learning in the Muslim world. Our religious countries and groups responded to the invitation. The International Criminal Court rejected all of them and became satisfied with the first response that was submitted by Al-Azhar Al-Sharif University, which is the greatest Islamic center of learning in the Muslim world. Many Islamic religious figures in the Muslim world criticized the Mufti of Egypt for agreeing to engage his prestigious institute in the affairs of such an anti-Islamic movement. For some Muslim leaders, such a trial should be considered blasphemy against divinely revealed heavenly books such as the Holy Quran and the blessed hadiths of the Prophet Muhammad, who was the master of creation and had been sent by Allah as a mercy to humanity. Chapter 50. A pleasant surprise at the Ramada Plaza Hotel in Toronto. Dr. Ibtihal was engrossed in those legal disputes for many months and forgot about her romantic life. She spent sleepless nights writing her thoughts on papers and during the day discussing those thoughts with her legal representatives. Dr. Ibtihal knew that this is her excellent opportunity to expose the causes of the Islamic religious terror and condemn them legally and universally. She also understood that if she could convince the International Criminal Court of the sources and causes of Islamic terrorism, then her Muslims' liberation movement would gain international acceptance and support. The Muslim apostate man Dr. Kamal was able somehow to shake his lovely girlfriend Ibtihal out of her deep involvement in the affairs of the coming international trial and made her give him some of her time. He suggested that they should get married, or at least they must be betrothed to each other before the trial. Before the condemned female author Dr. Ibtihal had landed in prison, the lovers planned to get engaged, and then after a few months to be united in a holy Christian matrimonial union. Their initial plan was to arrange a party for the directors of the Muslims' liberation movement and surprise them by revealing their decision to be together first as fiancé and fiancée, and then soon after, husband and wife. Muslims' liberation movement and surprise them by revealing their decision to be together first as fiancé and fiancée, and then soon after, husband and wife. Alas, that wonderful dream was prevented by the trial of the controversial author Ibtihal and her incarceration for 2 years. When she came out of prison, she was caught up with her desire to condemn the so-called holy religious texts of Islam. Therefore, followed those few months of her struggle to convince the Criminal Court of Toronto to place the Quran and the books of the Hadiths under ban. When she failed to do so, she followed the advice of her lover and transferred her lawsuit to the International Criminal Court in the Netherlands. The lover Dr. Kamal reminded his beloved Dr. Ibtihal of their former decision to arrange a party for the directors of the Muslims' liberation movement and surprise them with their desire to get first united as a fiancé and then get married shortly after. Dr. Ibtihal tried to convince her lover to wait until the International Criminal Court trial is over and then get into their personal affairs of love, romance, and marriage. But Dr. Kamal insisted that they should do it before the trial. Dr. Ibtihal eventually gave in to the demand of her lover and acquiesced to their engagement. When the lovers decided to be together, her apostate lover is 47 years old, and the lovely girl Ibtihal is 30 years of age. Even though there is a generation gap of 17 years between the two intimate souls, still, the Princess Ibtihal's genius mentality and charismatic personality made her highly educated lover Dr. Kamal feel that she is more advanced in age than him, and her wisdom is incomparable to his experience in life. All the 150 directors of the Muslims Liberation Movement have been invited to attend an important meeting in the Ramada Plaza Hotel in Toronto. None of the directors has been given any specific agenda for the meeting. However, every director thought the meeting has something to do with the soon-coming historical trial of the International Criminal Court in Hague. Be prepared to express their opinions and suggestions about the historical trial. After spending the most horrifying years of her age in torture and suffering, in courts and prisons, in running from country to country, and in hiding from the Islamic terrorists, in miraculously escaping the gallows in Sudan, and assassination attempts in Greece, the UK, Turkey, and Canada, the Muslim apostate girl Dr. Ibtihal Taha Alamin decided to lay down her weapons for a while and steal some time to enjoy her new love. During those years of being a fugitive and living underground, the Sudanese apostate girl was not sure about what was going to happen to her minute after minute. She was not certain whether she was going to see the sunrise of the next day. She was forced to hide wherever she went and be without an address. Only her lover Dr. Kamal among her directors and employees knows where she is living. Even so, her ideas and plans through her controversial speeches and writings had reached the other end of the world. Hardly there is no one in the world who did not hear about her yet. She is loved by many and hated by many more. Millions of people want to kill her, and millions want to give their lives for her. Therefore, the United Nations organization considered her the most controversial female writer and speaker of the 21st century. While the board of directors of the Muslims Liberation Movement is waiting in a beautiful meeting room in the Ramada Plaza Hotel, suddenly the second man in the movement, Dr. Kamal, walked while he is followed by the First Lady, the Princess Dr. Ibtihal. Everyone stood up to welcome the two heads of the movement. It is Dr. Kamal who has conveyed the glad news. "Ladies and gentlemen," said Dr. Kamal, while he is holding the hand of his beloved girlfriend, the lovely Princess Dr. Ibtihal, by her waist with one hand and holding the microphone in the other hand, "We have invited you here not for a meeting, but for celebrating a happy party. Ibtihal and I have decided to get betrothed, and we want all the directors to celebrate such a wonderful occasion with us." Is a boundless joy to all the directors. All the leaders of the Muslims Liberation Movement expressed their happiness by hugging or shaking the hands of the two lovers. After that, Dr. Kamal and the Princess Dr. Ibtihal exchanged their engagement rings. After the engagement ceremony, the guests celebrated the dinner party with the newly betrothed couple. Chapter 51. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. Before she flies to the International Criminal Court in the Netherlands for attending the trial against the verses of the Quran and hadiths of the alleged prophet of Allah, the Muslim apostate girl Ibtihal has published her fourth controversial book under the title, He Who Has Ears to Hear, Let Him Hear. She was inspired by the idea of writing such a book while she was serving her 2 years of imprisonment in a maximum security women's prison in Western Canada. She wrote its manuscript while she was alone in her small cell in the city of Prince Albert, in the province of Saskatchewan. It is a call for the international community to wake up from its delusion and self-deception of the false claim that Islam is the religion of peace. She wants non-Muslims to face and fight the dangers of Islamic terrorism, which are originated and deeply rooted in the main sacred texts of Islam, the so-called inspired Book of Allah, which is called the Holy Quran, and the hadiths of the alleged prophet of God Muhammad. Thus, the genius Sudanese female author has begun her latest masterpiece. With the ebb of multiculturalism and the alarming presence of anti-freedom Muslim supporters in every city in the West, there are no more safe havens left. Unless the present laws in the West are modified or changed to address these phenomena, the Western cities would soon devolve into Saudi Arabia, Somalia, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and the like. The present Western laws have been openly misused and abused by those who have religious laws that are contrary to the spirit of freedom. Islam's so-called divinely revealed laws succinctly allow them to abuse all women and terrorize others who are deemed as unclean infidels. Were in their Muslim countries of origin, why would they want vernacular, secular laws to grant them the freedom to abuse and terrorize? Why do they want the free license to build more mosques to preach jihad against infidels and recruit more terrorists in France, the UK, Spain, Germany, Sweden, the Netherlands, the USA, Canada, Australia, etc., etc., etc.? In the same vein, why do they want to kill those who criticize their prophet or expose him for what he is? Why do they want the world to believe evil is good and unrighteousness is acceptable? Why do they term the rape of an underage girl as marriage? Why do they want the world to respect someone who practiced pedophilia through his marriage of the child bride Aisha, adultery with Maria, incest with Zainab, kidnap and rape of Safiya, tortured the old woman Kurfa, and allowed his followers to invade and slaughter infidels, enslave their women and children, rob their properties, rape their wives and daughters, and occupy their lands? How can they justify crimes and atrocities that had been committed by an aggressor, sinner, raider, murderer, torturer, adulterer, rapist, child abuser, terrorist, and instigator of evil who was an alleged prophet of God? How is it that they want the world to follow a religion that justifies the killing of polytheists, infidels, and apostates? Why do they want to be free to criticize other religions and kill those who criticize them? Why do they want to convert people to their religion and kill those who leave theirs? And why do they want to have Sharia courts in Western countries and apply their religious laws, which are obviously incompatible with Western values? Why do they want to build more mosques in the lands of the infidels and forbid Christians to build churches in Muslim countries? How can they demand that secular courts allow a man to marry 4 women at the same time, a husband to beat his disobedient wife, a brother's inheritance to be double that of his sister, the testimony of a man to be equal to 2 women, and to set aside the testimony of a woman who witnessed the murder of her own son or daughter? Disallows any woman to divorce her husband, not to obtain custody of her children after divorce, restricts the woman from appearing in public without her proper chaperone, adheres to the rigid female dress code of hijabs, niqabs, burqas, demands that no woman is to step out alone without a male muharram, honor killings, among many misogynistic teachings against women. A Sharia codified in severe draconian laws prescribes the amputation of hands and legs of thieves, flogging of those who drink alcohol, beheading of murderers, stoning of adulterers, hanging gay people in public places, among other atrocities. A religion that commands its followers to slaughter those who reject their faith and kill those who leave their satanic cult. Such cruel religious practices and Sharia courts must not be allowed on any Western soil and in non-Muslim countries. No Muslim in the entire world will admit that Islam is the religion of violence, but none can deny that for the most part, Islam's spread was at the point of a sword. Islam's sword sanctioned invading, killing, robbing, raping, and enslaving of the infidels' women and children, forcing people to accept Muhammad as a prophet on pain of death. Therefore, it is a waste of time and futile to debate those issues on TV or in colleges with Muslim clerics or the so-called moderate Muslims. They will use their Islamic taqiyya and deny everything and use abrogated verses of the Meccan Quran or change the topic and attack the Jewish Old Testament or criticize Western lifestyle and equalizes secular life with Christianity. It is my humble advice to anyone reading these words never to put yourself in such an awkward situation with lying, hypocritical Muslims and their demagogues, and those who support their lies such as Islam is the religion of peace, or there is moderate Islam versus radical Islam from the political correctness camp. Just go ahead, expose the evils of Islam, and do that in the media, schools and colleges, Hindu temples and Jewish synagogues, and Christian churches. I know it is difficult to get a chance to share your views about Islam in the Western media and Jewish synagogues and Christian churches. I know it is difficult to get a chance to share your views about Islam in the Western media. There is a huge difference between the Western world and the Muslim world. Muslim clerics have full access to the media and speak freely and openly while condemning Jews and Christians and calling them brothers of apes and pigs and denouncing the West and calling for jihad against the so-called infidels, whereas in the Western media and schools, this is completely forbidden, and anyone dares to do it is labeled as a hater and is liable for prosecution. Unless some brave people stand against political correctness and expose the evils of Islam, this epidemic and the Sharia dominion will spread all over the West. Unless people learn the values of Christianity and turn to God, Islam will have an advantage over the moral decay and lack of spirituality and convert many youths to its satanic cult. Islam offers empty spirituality, superficial morals, and fantasy of immoral promises of virgins and orgies, which are based on hatred, violence, and blindly obeying demeaning laws. Secularism, atheism, and political correctness are giving Islam distinct advantages over the Western world. Only by turning back to the gospel of the Prince of Peace and following his commandments of love and righteous living will we be able to refute and expose the message of violence and oppression and hostility and hatred in the Quran, which is embodied in the person of Muhammad. While I am rewriting these words, which I wrote for the first time in prison, I received a message on my Facebook page from a friend, my dear friend Dr. Ibtihal. I do not know if you have time to address this, but if you did, I would appreciate it immensely. New Bible versions remove Father and Son of God because it offends Muslims. See the latest version of the Wycliffe Holy Bible. What a shame. First of all, let me say it straight. The Quran is from the Antichrist and Muhammad's message is from the devil, to be sure. The Quran is from the Antichrist because it denies and opposes the main tenets of Christianity. Holy Bible. What a shame. First of all, let me say it straight. The Quran is from the Antichrist and Muhammad's message is from the devil, to be sure. The Quran is from the Antichrist because it denies and opposes the main tenets of Christianity. It denies the Holy Trinity and strongly and openly rejects the divinity, sonship, crucifixion, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. See Surah Al-Nisa 4. Verse 171 and Surah Al-Ma'idah 5, verse 17. It condemns Christians as infidels who deserve hellfire because they believe in these essential doctrines. See Surah Al-Ma'idah 5, verses 70 to 75, and Surah Al-Ma'idah 5, verses 116 to 117. Without these doctrines, the gospel of Christ is empty, and Christians have no message to preach to the world. Fight the lies of Satan with truth, hate with love, evil with good, fear with courage, and never ever hesitate to speak the truth and expose the evils of Islam. As we had seen in the previous chapters, the core message of Islam is pure evil and there is nothing good in it. Having said that, it is never my intention, and you can tell by all my writings, to promote hatred, violence, or to incite anyone to kill any fellow human being. Muslims, without exception, are all victims of Islam. I pray for the freedom of all Muslims and especially Muslim female children and women who are the first victims of this satanic cult, which they inherited from their families with no option but to blindly follow without ever realizing that it is the main cause of their abuse and misery. As the great Hindu sage, Sri Aurobindo put it, the only way of making the Mohammedans harmless is to make them lose their faith in their religion. And this cannot be done through hatred and violence, but through honest and direct confrontation and exposition of the evils that they are following, and this must be done in the spirit of love. Muslims all over the world need to know that their religion is evil. By telling them Islam is a religion of peace, you are doing harm to them and making a mockery of the truth. We should neither appease them nor allow their demagogues to deceive us with such an untruth. Oi, I have come that they may have life, and that they may have it more abundantly. Gospel of John chapter 10, verse 10. This is the best distinction between the mission of Jesus Christ on earth and the message of Muhammad to the world. Jesus said he has come to give his followers abundant life, but Islam orders its followers to blow their bodies into smithereens with the false promise of going to the paradise of the 72 virgins. Jesus also said, "Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." The Gospel of John chapter 8, verse 32. Only speaking the truth can set Muslims free and save the world from the evils of Muhammad and his Quran. You may not look at Islam as your enemy, but Islam teaches its followers to treat you as their enemy and to kill you. I will cast terror into the hearts of those who disbelieve, non-Muslims, which are also called by the Quran the unclean infidels. Therefore, strike off their heads and strike off every fingertip of them. Surah Al-Anfal 8, verse 12. Islam commands its followers not to befriend you, not make you their leaders, or deal with you in anything. Let not the believers take disbelievers for their friends in preference to believers. Whoever does this have no connection with Allah unless you are guarding yourselves against them as a precaution. Allah bids you beware of himself. And to Allah is the journey. Surah Al-Imran 3, verse 28. The preceding verse forewarns Muslims from Muwalat al-Kafirin, which means no friendship or alliance with all infidels, and alerts them to the consequences of such an action, with one exception being an extreme necessity when one must avoid or protect oneself from the harm or injury inflicted upon him by the infidels through presenting an outer appearance that belies what one conceals inside. This is known as taqiyya, and it is only permitted under such circumstances. Today, the so-called moderate Muslims and their demagogues are practicing openly taqiyya. Still, there are the so-called infidels of political correctness who want to force us to practice the same to please Muslims and Muslim countries. SE specifies Jews and Christians and commands Muslims never to take them as friends. O you who believe! Do not take the Jews and Christians for friends. They are friends of one another. And whoever of you who takes them for friends is one of them. Surely Allah does not guide wrongdoing people. Surah Al-Ma'idah 5, verse 51. Only an ex-Muslima who has forsaken this dangerous religious cult can understand what it means to be an apostate from Islam. Muslims reserve their most vehement hate and terror for apostates. An apostate is a Muslim who left Dar al-Islam, land of Islam, and joined Dar al-Harb, land of war or infidels. In so doing, he committed treason and deserved to be cruelly killed, and his body should be disposed of in inhumane ways. According to the Sharia, an apostate should be killed, and his dead body should neither be buried in the Muslim graveyard nor in the Christian or Jewish cemetery. The first caliph, Abu Bakr al-Siddiq, used to tell those whom he sent to fight the apostatized tribes, "Call them to re-embrace Islam. If they refuse, do not spare any one of them. Burn them with fire, kill them with force, and take their women and children as war booty." Al-Tabari, Part 2, page 258 and page 272. The fourth caliph, Ali ibn Abi Talib, used to kill the apostates and then order the burning of their corpses. Some apostates were brought to Ali, and he burnt them. Sahih al-Bukhari, Part 9, Hadith number 59. A man from the tribe of Bani Ajil became a Christian. They brought him to Ali chained in irons. Ali talked to him for a long time. The man said to him, "I know that Jesus is the Son of God." Ali stood up and stepped on him. When the people saw that, they, too, stood up and stepped on him. Then Ali told them, "Kill him." They killed him. Then Ali ordered them to burn him. Ibn Hazm, Part 2, page 190. Another Muslim apostatized and became a Christian. Ali ordered him to repent, but he refused. Ali killed him and did not deliver his corpse to his family. They offered him a lot of money to do so, but Ali refused and burned the corpse. Ibn Hazm, Part 2, page number 190. The so-called rightly guided caliphs Abu Bakr and Ali followed the commandment of their prophet Muhammad, who used to order his troops to kill and burn Christians and Jews. 2. Page number 190. The so-called rightly guided caliphs Abu Bakr and Ali followed the commandment of their prophet Muhammad, who used to order his troops to kill and burn Christians and Jews. While Osama bin Zayd, commander of Muhammad's army, was preparing his troops to commence the invasion of the Byzantine Empire and capture the lands of the Jews and Christians, the Prophet Muhammad commanded him, saying, "Attack them in the darkness of the dawn and fall on them through killing and burning them with fire and invade them and return with the booty." Ibn Habib in Al-Mahabar, page 117, Ibn Kathir in Al-Bidayah and Al-Nihaya, page 139. And page 143, Ibn Said al-Naz in Ayan al-Atharig. Page 145, Al-Suhili in Rad al-Anif, page 24, Ibn Ishaq, page 245, and Al-Tabari in Tariq al-Ruzal and Al-Maluk, page 156. To prove that the so-called rightly guided caliphs, Abu Bakr and Ali, did not invent such evil and inhumane practices of burning infidels and apostates, but they obeyed and followed in the footsteps of their prophet. I have mentioned 6 authentic Islamic references that included the above quote about the evil command of their prophet who ordered the burning of the called unclean infidels among the Christians and Jews. Moreover, killing apostates is mentioned in the most authentic collections of Muhammad's hadiths, Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. Allah's apostle said, "The blood of a Muslim who confesses that none has the right to be worshipped but Allah and that I am his apostle cannot be shed except in 3 cases: in punishment for murder, a married person who commits illegal sexual intercourse, and the one who reverts from Islam, apostate, and leaves the Muslims." Sahih Muslim, Volume 9, Book 83, Hadith number 17. The Prophet Muhammad said, "Whoever changes his religion, kill him." Sahih al-Bukhari, Hadith number 6922. So far, I have been an apostate from Islam for many years, and I will not be exaggerating if I say there is not a single day passed without me receiving a death threat from Muslims through the internet chat rooms and Facebook. My Facebook account had been deleted 5 times. Likewise, my YouTube account was deleted due to the Muslims group reporting all manner of imagined transgressions. Many times, I had been banned from joining Paltalk, TikTok, and Clubhouse chat rooms by Muslim co-administrators. Until today, due to Muslims complaining, I am banned from opening a chat room or joining any room as an administrator. For many years, I could not return to my country, Sudan, due to the capital punishment of apostasy. From a reliable source, I came to know that my name is blacklisted at the Khartoum International Airport. It does not stop with cyberbullying, but Muslim harassment has reached the western city where I used to live. Recently, a member of the notorious terrorist group known as the Muslim Brotherhood, who lives a couple of blocks away from my apartment, threatened to kill me more than 10 times, and the Western police did nothing to him. He is a well-known terrorist, went to jail 4 times, and the police confiscated 2 knives from him. I had recorded his life threats more than 10 times and reported him to the police. In the recordings, he called me an apostate and accused me of defaming his religion and insulting his prophet. He even described how he is going to slaughter me with his knife. He mimicked the sound that would come out of my mouth while his knife is cutting my throat. He said it would not take him more than 3 minutes to kill me. He mentioned me by name and mentioned his full name in those recordings. Then, he reminded me of the Dutch filmmaker Van Gogh, who was assassinated by a Muslim. Van Gogh worked with Somali-born female writer Ayaan Hirsi Ali to produce the film Submission, which was critical of the treatment of women in Islam. On November 2, 2004, he was assassinated by Mohammed Bieri, a Dutch-Moroccan Muslim. Working from a script written by Ayaan Hirsi Ali, Van Gogh created the 10-minute short film Submission. The movie deals with violence against women in some Islamic societies. It tells the stories, using visual shock tactics, of 4 abused Muslim women. This member of the Muslim Brotherhood believed that I am worse than the Dutch film director because of my books on the issues of women in Islam and terrorism. The Western police went to his house and talked to him. Of course, he practiced his Islamic taqiyya and denied it. He was not arrested or even detained for a single hour. The sergeant who was handling my case told me that his boss said to him the court would not accept the life threat recorded over the internet. Then the sergeant said to me, if he meets me somewhere and threatens to kill me and I have witnesses, or he comes to my apartment and tries to kill me, then I can call the police number 911. In other words, Unless this dangerous jailbird and notorious terrorist carries out his life threat and kills me, I have no sufficient evidence to accuse him of wanting to murder me. Tracy Rolfe Collins writes, "This is absolutely crazy. This ex-Muslim woman is being relentlessly bullied, harassed, and receiving death threats daily, and unless she is actually murdered, the Canadian police are powerless to intervene. That is simply criminal." Diana Stone's prayer: "I pray a hedge of protection around you, your family, your home, and your surroundings, wherever you may be. The blood of Jesus is more powerful than the enemy, and I pray the blood of Jesus around you." The devil makes his plans and fills the world with threats and intimidation, but he who is in you is greater than he who is in the world. This kind of life threat and intimidation is spreading all over the Western world, and its perpetrators are openly carrying their placards and challenging the free societies with catchphrases like, while shouting in unison, "Bomb bomb USA, bomb bomb UK. Nuke nuke Denmark. We will invade Denmark and take their wives as war booty. USA Osama bin Laden on his way. Death to America. Islam will dominate the world. Islam is the solution. Sharia is the true solution. Freedom go to hell. British soldiers are baby killers, rapists, and burn in hell. Are dead in paradise. You're dead in hell. Hang those who insult the Prophet, etc." Every time and everywhere this kind of threat and intimidation happened, no one got arrested. Europe is reliving the Dark Ages all over again. The Sharia courts and the Inquisition police of political correctness are everywhere in the heart of Western civilization. No one is free to speak or write against their evil scheme. Anyone who dares to speak against them is crucified with the charge of hate crime by the goons of political correctness and risk being thrown behind bars or brutally murdered by their predators. Their leaders are given platforms to speak openly on the BBC, CNN, Fox News, and Al Jazeera satellite TV, and proclaim their agendas of implementing their Sharia and turning London into Londonistan and the White House into Black House after the model of their Black Kaaba. Their dictators move freely, spreading their terror and threatening to wipe out nations, and yet they're allowed to preach their evil in the United Nations International Annual Meetings and Columbia University. Although the International Criminal Court has convicted some of them of war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide, still they fly from country to country without being detained or extradited to the International Criminal Court in the Netherlands. Their demagogues feed the world lies and convince the simple-minded that there is a good religion known as moderate Islam and there is something evil called radical Islam. H.L. Mencken defines a demagogue as one who will preach doctrines he knows to be untrue to men he knows to be idiots. No wonder they have many sympathizers in Congress. From the White House, they are planning to move to Ground Zero and build their Cordoba mosque on the graves of their victims and proclaim their official return and final victory over the pinnacle city of the Western world. Their next movement is to demand the creation of Sharia courts in every city and every state. Then there must be a law for Muslims and a different law for non-Muslims. Just like in India, it is legal for a Muslim man to have 4 wives and illegal for a Hindu man to marry more than 1 wife. A Muslim man can marry an underage girl and beat his disobedient wife because his so-called divinely revealed Mohammedan law allows him to do so. Surah Al-Talaq 65, verse 4 and Surah Al-Nisa 4, verses 3 and 34. According to one of their leaders, Islam is not in America to be equal to any other faith, but to become dominant. The Quran should be the highest authority in America, and Islam the only accepted religion on earth. Omar Ahmed, chairman of Council on American Islamic Relations, CAIR, in 1998. This means other religions such as Judaism, Christianity, Hinduism, and Buddhism, and their followers have no right to exist on earth. That is the message of the religion of peace to the world. Convert to Islam or you have no right to live. In the Quran and Hadiths of Muhammad, there is nothing called radical Islam and moderate Islam. Islam is one and its core message is evil in its darkest form. If you believe Islam is a religion of peace, you are either ignorant, hypocrite, or seduced by political correctness. Yes, it is true there are many peace-loving Muslims, but they are so because they don't follow everything written in their Quran and practice everything mentioned in the hadiths of their prophet. There are also law-abiding Muslims who practice taqiyya while they are living in non-Muslim countries. And finally, there are the true Muslims who are sincerely following to the very letter the teachings of their religious texts, and these are the so-called radical Muslims. The problem is, how do I know the Muslim who is living behind my backyard is which one of the three types of Muslims? Radical, moderate, or lukewarm? After all, Muhammad Atta and his terrorist gang were law-abiding Muslims until the morning of September 11, 2001, which proved otherwise. Islam is the only religion in the world that its religious texts, the Quran and Hadiths, which are embodied in the Sharia laws, are fixed and final, and no Islamic authority can modify or reform them. After the death of Muhammad, no mortal being can change those laws. It is the well-accepted doctrine that those laws are applicable to all times and places. To reform or modify those laws is to admit that Muhammad had committed terrible sins and hideous crimes, and that the Quran is not applicable to all times and places, and no Muslim can take such a stand and remain Muslim or continue to live. Those who tried to reform or modify those fixed and rigid laws lost their lives, such as Mahmoud Muhammad Taha in Khartoum, Sudan, and Faraj Foda in Cairo, Egypt. Islamophobia is bogus, and fear of terrorism is a natural but necessary passion for defeating the evils of Islam. Why the religious terrorists are always from countries such as Afghanistan, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Egypt, Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, Iran, Somalia, Sudan, Indonesia, Libya, Tunisia, and other Arabian countries. What is common among these countries? They are all Muslim countries. Why all those who carried out terrorist attacks or plotted to commit terrorist acts in Western countries were all Muslims? Why the so-called Magnificent 19 terrorists who carried out the cowardly attacks on September 11th were from Saudi Arabia, Egypt, United Arab Emirates, and Lebanon? Why do we not see Hindus, Buddhists, Jews, Christians, Confucians, or even atheists carrying out suicide attacks on schools, churches, temples, restaurants, trains, planes, beaches, theaters, and public buildings? Why is it almost always a Muslim? Can you convince a Jew, a Christian, a Buddhist, or a Sikh to blow up his body in smithereens and kill innocent men, women, and children because they are not following his religion? Of course, you cannot. Why are those who practice the evils of honor killings on their so-called bad daughters or adulterous wives always Muslims? Why is it only the Muslim who inflicts female genital mutilation and upholds child marriage? The answers to all these questions can be found within the pages of the Quran and the books of the Hadiths of the alleged prophet of God Muhammad, which are believed to be divinely revealed and applicable to all times and places, in the East as well as in the West. And he who has ears to hear, let him hear, thus says the Lord Jesus Christ, in the Gospel of Mark, chapter 4, verse 9.